I'm the world's most powerful necromancer, but there's just one problem. Everyone's getting cremated these days. The woman at the funeral home gave me that plastic smile they all seem to perfect in mortuary school. We're seeing about 90% of our clients opt for cremation these days, she said, tapping her pen against a glossy brochure. It's really the environmentally conscious choice. I fought back a grimace. 3 centuries of perfecting my craft, and here I was, being lectured about environmental impact by someone who probably thought necromancy was a heavy metal band. But surely, I said, keeping my voice steady, some families still prefer traditional burial? For religious reasons, perhaps? She nodded, but her expression remained unchanged. Some do, but even many religious families are choosing cremation now. We have lovely urns, if you'd like to see our catalog? I declined and left the 4th funeral home this week. Outside, the autumn wind whipped dead leaves around my feet, dead things that, unlike human corpses, I couldn't control. My phone buzzed, another obituary alert, another cremation. Back in my basement workspace, I stared at my wall of artifacts. Centuries-old grimoires, bones from a dozen species, crystals that could channel the energy of death itself, all gathering dust. The only corpse I'd managed to raise in the past 3 months was a recently deceased cat whose owner had insisted on burial in their backyard. And even that had been disappointing. The cat just hissed at me and ran away. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus, another practitioner. Hey, any luck? His text read, "None," I replied. You? Found one last week. Guy wanted a green burial. But get this, they wrapped him in some kind of biodegradable shroud. Tried raising him and he just fell apart. I tossed my phone aside and slumped into my chair. Even when we did find intact bodies, modern burial practices were making them useless. Formaldehyde-free embalming, eco-friendly coffins, it was like the whole death care industry had conspired against us. That's when I saw the newspaper article I'd clipped weeks ago but hadn't had the courage to consider. Local hospital opens new morgue facility. I picked it up, reading it again slowly. State-of-the-art refrigeration, digital security, capacity for 30 bodies. It was risky, incredibly risky, but I was running out of options. 3 nights later, I was parked behind the hospital, dressed in scrubs I'd ordered online. The ID badge hanging from my neck was a near-perfect forgery, another skill you pick up over centuries of necromantic practice. The hard part wasn't getting in. It was avoiding the cameras. Modern security systems were the bane of my existence. I made it to the morgue level using a service elevator, muttering incantations under my breath to blur my image on any cameras I couldn't avoid. The morgue itself was exactly as advertised. State-of-the-art, stainless steel everything. The air had that artificial cleanness that only modern hospitals can achieve. I checked the intake log. 3 bodies, all awaiting release to funeral homes. 2 were marked for cremation, but one, I felt my pulse quicken, was scheduled for traditional burial. Jace Moore, 84, natural causes. I found his drawer and pulled it open. The body was perfect, no autopsy, minimal medical intervention. I began the incantation, my fingers tracing ancient symbols in the air. That's when the door opened. I wondered when one of us would try this, said a voice behind me. I turned to find an elderly Asian man in a lab coat, looking at me with an expression of mild amusement. It took me a moment to process what I was seeing. He was slightly transparent, and his feet weren't quite touching the floor. I started. Dead? Yes, Dr. Jace Moore, former head of pathology. And you're a necromancer who's about to try to raise my body. I looked back at the corpse on the slab, then at the ghost. But, he waved his hand dismissively. Please, don't. I spent 40 years in this hospital. I'd rather not spend my afterlife here too. You don't understand, I said. Our art is dying. When everyone's cremated then adapt, he interrupted. That's what science does. That's what medicine does. Why should necromancy be any different? I stared at him. Adapt how? He smiled. You know, in all my years studying death, I learned one thing. It's never really the end. It just changes form. He gestured around the morgue. Maybe it's time for necromancy to do the same. I left the hospital that night without raising any corpses, but Dr. Moore's words stayed with me. The next day, I began researching molecular biology and quantum physics. I studied energy patterns in cremated remains and the properties of scattered ashes. It's been 6 months since then. Yesterday, I successfully communicated with a spirit whose ashes had been scattered in a memorial garden. It wasn't the same as raising a corpse. It was better, cleaner, more dignified. The woman at the funeral home was right about one thing. Times change, even for necromancers, especially for necromancers. I kept Dr. Moore's business card. Sometimes, on quiet nights, we discuss the future of death magic over spectral cups of tea. He's right, it's never really the end. It just changes form.